Kevin Pelton, ESPN.com NFL NBA Insider, and I have talked many times over the years, Kevin, and normally it has been gloom and doom and whether or not this was going to work out and whether they were going in the right direction. Are we starting to finally get some positive vibes when you and I have a conversation?
For sure. Yeah, I remember some dark days when we've talked before, but it was always about keeping your eyes on that long-term outcome, and now it's not just within sight, it's here really with Joel Embiid and the way he's played this year.
Yeah, the eye was always kind of like, okay, something's down the road. In your opinion, is it progressed faster this season than you thought of when Simmons went down?
For sure, because, I mean, coming off the two missed seasons for Embiid, no one realized how good he was going to be, how quickly. I mean, even going back to when he was healthy at Kansas, where he was never really healthy, he looked like the number one guy in that year's draft before the navicular injury, but he wasn't necessarily head and shoulders ahead of the Andrew Wiggins, Jabari Parker group of players who ended up going 1 and 2. And, his performance now has vastly exceeded what either of those two guys has been able to do in the NBA.
Yeah, I don't know that there's too many people that could have envisioned this when he came out in the court. But from what you're watching from him, number one, how far has he exceeded expectations for you? And number two, do you think he has enormous room to get considerably even better?
Well, to take the second question first, he's playing well enough that I don't know if I would say enormous or considerable room to get better, just because if he's already playing at an all-star level on a per-minute basis, and I don't think there's much debate about that. You can't get much better than having the best rim protection numbers in the league. There's only so much better to get. As to the first question, I mean, when I envisioned his rookie season, especially watching him in the preseason, it seemed like, okay, he's going to have a high level of involvement in the offense, create a lot of shots, but probably do so at a low efficiency. We have seen a lot of turnovers, but he's scored at above average efficiency, which is really remarkable given, how little he's set up by teammates compared to most centers. And then defensively, it's come around much faster than I expected. That's the thing. Offensively, you can work on a lot of moves. You can hone your post-up game, develop a three-point shot, all of the things that we have seen from him on offense. But defense, the things you can work on, but a lot of that is the ability to recognize plays, read plays in a 5-on-5 situation that you just can't simulate in a practice setting. So for him to improve as quickly as he has been really impressive.
You touched on it a little bit there, Kevin Pelton, ESPN.com. So how impressive is it to you that he's done this with so little basketball experience?
It's really making me rethink a lot of what I believed about player development and, the ability to really develop skills one-on-one and translate that on the court. Obviously, again, you can do that in terms of shooting ability and post moves and things like that, but either he has he's tremendously blessed with gifts that other players don't have, or, you can do a lot more of that than I thought.
Now the tough part, over the years, Kevin, we've talked about, Nerlens Noel, and then there was Jahlil Okafor, and then it was, how are all of them going to play together? Well, now they have the three. They haven't played a lot together, but is it apparent to you that somebody's got to go, and maybe even two?
I think for sure one. Obviously the part of this is the possibility that's always there of some sort of re-injury with Embiid. So I don't know that you necessarily want to trade both guys if you still believed in them as legitimate starting center options in the NBA. And I think that is true with Noel. I'm not as convinced of that with Okafor. But there's just never going to be enough playing time to satisfy three guys when it's so difficult to play two of them together.
Do you think that Okafor will be attractive to other teams this season, given that he hasn't really played that much?
It's tough to say. I mean, I think the bigger challenge, it's less about the fact that he hasn't played very much and more about the fact that, there's not a lot of teams that are desperate for centers right now. There's more centers to go around than there are really teams in need of playing time there because of the fact that it's difficult to play two of those guys together. So I don't know that I see anyone that has that urgent need that they're going to go out and give up, a lottery pick for Okafor. If the Sixers are going to move him, it's probably going to have to be at a substantial loss, kind of cut their losses from where they drafted him.
It's interesting because Okafor seemed like a legitimate offensive, low post guy. And that's not to say that he's not, but he seems lost here. And a lot of that is defensive. But even, do you think he's regressed offensively too, Kevin?
I don't think so. I think that may be a case where the limited playing time has hurt him a little bit. We've seen moments from him like the start he had a couple weeks ago where, he's put up really impressive offensive numbers. So I don't think that's going to be the concern with other teams so much as really those defensive limitations.
That's you made a comment about, if in the event that Embiid got hurt or, something happened to him, that's where I think the Sixers are in an interesting spot. Would they want to move forward with Noel as kind of the main guy, or does Okafor become more valuable to them in that situation?
I think the fact that they've played so much better defensively with Noel on the court makes him the choice there. And, we saw how quickly the team improved when Noel stepped into that backup center spot. That's not entirely him. That's also, timing up with Embiid continuing to improve defensively. But what we've seen with those two guys as a rotation is that the Sixers can be an elite defensive team.
Yeah, and they've gotten, and I'll ask you too, have you noticed there's a lot of metrics out there, showing how much better they have gotten defensively this season specifically? I think they're in the top 10 in the league right now, correct?
Yeah, and then when you split out, maybe take out the first month of the season, even higher than that. So, first off, you've got a really quality rim protector in the game at all times when it's that Embiid-Noel rotation. And then the improvement that Robert Covington has made as a perimeter defender this season. He came into the season, you thought of him as a versatile defender who can defend, kind of those some small forwards, some power forwards, and there's a lot of value to that. But he's taken that next step this year in terms of not just being a guy who can defend both of those positions, but a guy who defends, small forwards and then even at times guards at a really high level.
I know a lot of the conversation always centers around Embiid and the big guys on this team, but Kevin, what are some of the ancillary things that impressed you about this team that they have been able to win 8 out of the 11? You got cast-off guys, a Robert Covington, a T.J. McConnell, Ersan Ilyasova, who's been on, in 5 teams, it seems like. That's traded multiple times in a season. So what are some of the things about, the pieces that they've been, some who have been here for part of this process and others who have got here now, that you like moving forward?
Yeah, Ilyasova, he's the kind of guy that I think is really ideal next to someone like Embiid because of the fact that, he's such a good defensive rebounder and rim protector that you can live with the fact that Ilyasova is only an okay defensive player at the power forward position. And that's, I think, a lot of the reason that he's moved on from those past teams is, they've gotten frustrated with not having a better defender at the 4 spot. The Sixers can live with that, and then he brings them, the floor spacing that they have so desperately coveted for such a long period of time, and he's had a huge impact because of that. Covington and McConnell are the two shining examples of the so-called Hinkie special of, mining for undrafted talent. In Covington's case, on his second team, everyone in the league had a chance at these guys, and the Sixers, because of the fact that they weren't using roster spots on veteran free agents, had the opportunity to bring them in and sign them to these favorable contracts, and now they're performing. McConnell, he's really been a steady hand at point guard for them, part of the success at the defensive end of the court, and then also doing a better job, I think, than anyone expected when he came out of college of creating offense for himself in addition to creating a lot for other guys.
Kevin, what do you think of the job that Brian Colangelo has done in the limited time that he's been here? What are you seeing from him?
Well, I think the main thing that he's done is kind of, continued the process, so to speak, and not diverted dramatically from it, even though they did go out and sign a couple of free agents last year, a couple of veteran free agents, and, Bayless and Gerald Henderson, and then also Sergio Rodriguez. The Ilyasova trade was, looks like a master stroke at this point to have gotten both him and then, potentially a first-round pick, maybe a second-round pick for Jeremy Grant, who, was another, another guy who, part of the effort of Hinkie to just bring in as many guys as possible. He didn't end up fitting as well because you needed more shooting from that power forward position that Ilyasova has provided, but you still got value for him in return. So now I think, another interesting test of how he handles the next month here, whether they go out and make any moves to try to win now and accelerate the process now that they have had some success, or again continue to build patiently with this young core.
Yeah, it's interesting because you wonder if, because Colangelo, I don't know that he was, I don't know, maybe you have a different opinion on this. He wasn't a huge fan of the Hinkie way, right? I mean, he wasn't like waving the pom-poms for what Hinkie was doing, correct?
No, although you'll recall that, he did admit that his last season in Toronto, they tried, in his words, to tank. I don't know if it's how I'd define tanking, because it was more about playing young guys than it was really trying to lose. But so it's not something that's entirely foreign to him. But I think if you expected him to come in and be the 180-degree opposite of Hinkie in terms of everything is now, and we got to have everyone be a veteran, then that certainly hasn't been the case. And I don't think that was consistent with what he did in Phoenix and Toronto.
Yeah. So I guess my question was going to be, do you feel that Embiid and maybe having Simmons and the expectations for him has changed the mindset of the Sixers front office?
I mean, certainly what it's shown you is there's a really high ceiling on what this team can do if it comes together. So I think what you want to do if you're, in charge of a team like that is not screw it up, basically. And that not everything is necessarily going to come together. We'll see how Simmons plays with Embiid when he gets healthy and everything works out. But you don't want to do anything that's going to limit that potential in terms of swallowing up your salary cap or, trading away some of these valuable guys on valuable contracts like Covington and McConnell. And I don't think they're going to do that. I think if, they do anything to accelerate the timetable at the trade deadline, it's probably going to be more around the edges.
So, Kevin, do you feel like the NBA fears that more teams will try to follow the Sixers model, seeing the young talent they have? Are they envious?
Well, it's certainly a lot more likely than it looked last April when Sam Hinkie resigned, and it was like, okay, well, we're done with this. He tried it, it didn't work, and we're never going to see this again. Now that it's starting to bear fruit, it looks a lot more attractive. But I still think, the short-term pain of going through the process that we all saw. You guys, I'm sure, felt as viscerally as Sixers fans over the last 3 years. I still think that's probably going to deter teams from being this aggressive.
Yeah, there's that fine line. We had this conversation a little bit yesterday where, if you're on if you're on one side that, for instance, I was a supporter of what they did mainly, and I didn't like that they were losing. I wasn't happy about it, but I understood where they were going. You had the other side, the people who just can't take the losing. They don't like it. They don't understand it. There's that split in the middle, and you wonder, are other teams going to go that drastic about it? But you almost wonder when you look at the NBA the way it's set up, Kevin, how many teams do you see that are realistic title contenders, that the Sixers are almost in better shape than teams 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in the standings?
Oh, for sure. We had this conversation last week on the True Hoop Mailbag podcast. Someone asked who will be the next team besides the Cavs and the Warriors to win a title, and the Sixers obviously came up along with, I think Milwaukee and Minnesota is the other young teams with the potential to do it. And it was pointed out afterwards, no one even mentioned the San Antonio Spurs, who were on pace to win 60 games this year. So I don't know if that's the actual correct answer. The Spurs probably do have a better chance of winning this year than, one of those teams that has of being kind of the first to get to that level with their young talent. But I don't know that there's a lot of teams in the league right now that, if you offered them the chance to switch places with Sixers, would say no.
Kevin, Mike, and I heard something discussed on the Jalen and Jacoby show about which young star would you rather build around, Joel Embiid, the Greek Freak, or Karl Anthony Towns. We liked that topic so much we put it up on a poll on our Twitter page. If you were the guy picking.
And who do you think's running away with that here?
I get one guess.
Yeah.
Can I give you the cop-out answer that we're actually, Chad Ford and I are probably going to write about this on Friday?
Oh, cool. Yeah.
That's a fine answer. Then we'll be reading it.
So you don't want to give that away. But I will then change it a little bit here in that you got a bunch of teams like Milwaukee, like Minnesota, like Philadelphia that have that young talent, and you look at the direction of those teams. It seems like, kind of going back to what we were saying, that man, these teams all kind of did it in similar ways in terms of getting that high pick in the draft. You look at this year's draft. There's so many people talking about what the right fit for a team like Philadelphia would be. What are they missing to put them in that category where they would have, that take that next step? Because they're going to still possibly have 2 picks this year.
Yeah, I mean, Chad Ford and I, what we wrote about today was the point guards in the draft and where they might fit, and writing about the chances of Philadelphia getting a top 5 pick. It's already quite good. It's lower a little bit every day as they keep winning these games, but we weren't even factoring in the possibility of getting that pick from the Lakers if it falls outside the top 3, the pick swap with Sacramento that could end up mattering a whole bunch this year when people kind of wrote that off, and you add another a good outside shooter, someone who's maybe an upgrade on Stauskas in that role, and I think that makes this offense a lot more dynamic. There's also the possibility of adding one of these elite point guards. Markelle Fultz is someone I get to watch on a regular basis out here in Seattle, and I think he's someone who fits ideally into what NBA teams are trying to do offensively with his pick and roll ability and the fact that he can play off the ball too. And then I'm intrigued by the idea of Lonzo Ball in Philadelphia because I think he's going to be really great in a situation where he's playing around other good players and can elevate them with his passing ability and bring in kind of an unselfish culture of sharing the ball and making the extra pass. And that's something that I think really could work quite well with guys like Simmons and Embiid.
Yeah, I wanted to get your take now seeing Embiid, because before it was, I don't know what to expect from him. How do you see him and Simmons as a duo?
I think the one disappointment is that, he's proven so good at creating his own shot, as I mentioned at the top of this, that the fact that Simmons is going to come in with that ability to create shots no longer quite as valuable as it would be in a vacuum. But, I like the idea of the Sixers being able to run some pick and roll with those two guys. I mean, Embiid's even been running some pick and rolls as a ball handler, which is crazy for someone as big as he is. But if Simmons is the ball handler in that pick and roll and Embiid is the screener, that's going to force a lot of teams to switch that pick and roll because guys who are power forwards are not used to defending the screen, running into the screen as opposed to be the guy defending who is screening. And when you switch that, then that's going to either give Simmons the quickness advantage on the perimeter or Embiid a size advantage in the post, or maybe both.
So what a lot of people, Joel Embiid said, we want to make the playoffs. They won 8 out of 11. Do you see that this team is I don't want to – okay, this year maybe seems far-fetched, but could you envision next year this team being talked about as a playoff team now?
I could, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think what the Sixers have done over this stretch is they've won a lot of close games, obviously, and the record looks a little bit better probably than they've actually played, although that evened out the fact that they lost so many close games throughout last year and early in this season. But they've been able to consistently play in close games, play at about a 500 level, and if you can do that over a full season, that puts you right in the playoff mix.
Yeah, and some would look at if Ben Simmons played this whole year paired with Embiid, you wonder where this year's team might be right now. I mean, they're 15 and whatever. They've lost a lot of late close games because they just simply didn't have the ball handler. You wonder if he was healthy and played, where they would be.
Right, although the one thing working against that is, as excited as we are about Simmons' future, fact is this year's rookie class has not exactly come in and lit it up during their rookie years.
That's true, and it's been Embiid and basically everybody else in this year's rookie class. Real quick before we kind of let you roll here, Saric. There was a lot of hype when they drafted him. We waited 2 years. What is your take on him so far as an NBAer?
I think the big thing I want to see him do is become more efficient inside the arc. There was so much talk about his three-point shot while he was overseas and continuing to develop, and he's come in and been a threat from three, as I think you would have hoped, but not been as good inside the arc as I expected. I think that's kind of limited his value.
All right, so far, intriguing NBA season. Sixers taking on the Clippers tonight, a team with a lot of injury problems. Looks like Blake Griffin could be back for them. No Chris Paul for a while. We saw a lot of upsets last night, but in the end, and we know LeBron came out. He's not happy. They need a playmaker, he says. In the end, is it still just a two-team race for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think Cleveland has opened the door a little bit with the fact that they've struggled this much. I mean, no longer do they look like the certain favorites in the Eastern Conference, but they're still pretty heavy favorites when you look at what they've been able to do in terms of turning it on in the playoffs the last couple of years.
Looking forward to the back end of this NBA season, the trade deadline, and, of course, a really good draft season this year, as Kevin kind of chronicled. A lot of great, talented players in this draft, specifically at positions the Sixers are lacking. He's Kevin Pelton, ESPN.com, NBA Insider, and check him out over there on Twitter at KPelton. Him and Chad Ford always do really good articles in the podcast, and, of course, right here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Kevin, appreciate it, pal.
All right, always a pleasure.